So we're 1/5 of the size of the angel community in Europe compared to the US, which says a lot for why US are able to grow such fast and established businesses from startup. They've just got more capital. Same with their VCs as well. They typically invest about 4 or 5 times as much as our VCs. What I've seen in the last few years is definitely a trend towards syndication. This is what I call the angel market growing up in the UK. Our research indicated that typically deals are being done with 6 business angels investing together now, which is quite interesting. And the average investment's about 40,000 per head. Businesses need more than 100,000 or 50,000 to get themselves through that valley of death, where they can get to potentially a profitable position. They need, typically I see early stage businesses wanting between 200,000 and 500,000. So you need a few angels to syndicate together to get to that figure. If there isn't a co-investment fund in the room, the angels might have to form a syndicate. It could be 10 or 12 angels. This is happening now. This is definitely a trend. And indeed, some research done by Nesta last year indicated that 41% of all deals done in the UK are now early stage investments with VCs and angels working together. So this is becoming a big movement in the market. And I think we'll see from some of the research in a minute that syndication makes a lot of sense if you're an angel. Spread your risks. So I draw your attention to this report, this yellow document. It's a very interesting read. And why did we do this? Well, we realized when we were knocking on government's door that one of the things we always get back from government is that policy makers cannot operate in the dark. If you want to go and ask them for something, they'll say, well, it sounds jolly interesting, but where's the evidence? If you want us to change the tax system, or if you want to run an awareness campaign, well, tell us what actually is happening and back it up with some hard data. So this was the challenge. Could we get the angels in the United Kingdom to actually fill in a very detailed survey? First problem is, where do we find them? So we went through the BBA to our own members. We have 25 angel groups and networks as members of the BBAA, which represent about 6,000 angels. So we had a population there of 6,000. How many of them would actually bother to complete the forms? Well, indeed, we got 158 of these angels to fill in the forms. They had actually invested £134 million into 1,080 businesses between 2001 and 2008. So it was quite a decent size of a survey. And indeed, to make it more interesting, we used the same professor that the Americans had used the previous year. So we wanted to have a comparison between the outcomes of our survey and the US one that was done. And we thought that's going to be very interesting. Can the Americans do this better than us? Probably they can, but let's see how close we are in terms of the outcomes and the returns. Well, giving some of the secrets away, one of the things we established was that there were, of those 1,080 deals that were mapped, 406 exits in that 7 years, which sounds very impressive. So nearly 1 in 3 deals was an exit. Then we realized that 56% of the 406 exits didn't return the stake money. So if you put 10,000 into a deal, you had at least a 50% chance you would never see your 10,000 again. So that's not good. So a high failure rate. But overall, if you take the whole 406 exits, map the whole lot together, the internal rate of return over the 7 years was 22% compound. Now, there aren't many asset classes that have yielded that return in that same period. So what you're seeing is that you can make money in angel investing, but it's high risk. But overall, it's potentially an asset class that you can make a return on. So how do you do it? And that's what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes. So first of all, our research. Let's map our results against the United States. We're the blue column, and the orange column is the US. So first of all, this is return times money. So if you put 100,000 into a business and you got 105,000 back, you've got more than a 1 times return, just above it. So we're not as bad, slightly worse actually, than the United States. They actually had 50% of their deals bombed. We had higher, 56%. So we were comparable there. But if we look then at what is more exciting is some of the better returns. So you can see here that over 30% of the deals gave between 1 and 5 times money. So 100,000 bet was returning maybe up to 500,000. And then it goes on. It's sub 10%. There are even some there at 30 times money. And isn't it interesting that the bar charts for the two sets of data are fairly close? Their sample was about 6 times the size of ours, but it would be because of the size of the population and the marketplace. So the trends were very, very similar, which I thought was fascinating. Then we thought, well, let's dig into these statistics a little more. So what this chart reveals, if you had no industry experience, you did even worse than the previous chart. You're up nearly at 60% didn't return the stake money. And you can see that if you had industry experience, you had a higher probability of winning. So first tip is back deals where you've got some experience. If you've got skills in digital industries, software, perhaps you stick with that sector. If you're manufacturing background and skills, stick to that sector. Or medical technology, maybe you stick to that sector. And then the next question we asked was, how many of you as investors actually did some due diligence? And we classified the threshold, the tipping point, as 20 hours. And again, you can see here, if you did more than 20 hours due diligence, you significantly improved your returns. An obvious point, but I have to say a lot of angels don't. My first angel deal I ever did, I did hardly any due diligence. I was lucky. I mean, it was a successful investment, but it was more by luck than judgment. I didn't do the sort of due diligence I would do now, because I didn't really know how to do it. And I think a lot of angels fall into that trap. They get very infatuated with the entrepreneur, and they just want to get in there and do the deal. But it's really important that you do some due diligence. And then we looked at how important it was to support your investment after it's made. And again, if you'd had high interaction with the company, you joined the board, you had contact with the entrepreneur, you supported them, encouraged them, your returns are likely to be much higher. And I would certainly advise, if you're in a syndicate, one of you in the syndicate should definitely join the board. And you should select who that person should be. And indeed, we also found that where you made the investment and you swamped the company with your time, you actually didn't probably do so well because you probably distracted the entrepreneurs, or perhaps you didn't have the skill sets you thought you did. Because you put the money in, you dominated that board, and actually that worked against you. So I think the secret here is to have a light touch and provide support and mentoring, but not actually to swamp the company. Tax. I've given talks across the world on angel investing. I've been privileged to do that the last 5 years. And every country I go to, when we talk about the tax breaks in the UK, the audience's jaws drop. They cannot believe that we have such an incredibly incentivized system for angel investing in the United Kingdom. There is nowhere in the world that gives these tax breaks. So you'll hear about this if you go into angel investing. But for example, you can invest, every taxpayer can invest $500,000 a year, every single one, and get a 20% tax break on what they invest. So you invest £10,000, and you have a £2,000 tax bill in the same year you make that angel investment. You don't have a £2,000 tax bill anymore, it disappears. So tax is important. There are rules and regulations relating to how you can claim these reliefs, but generally they're easily available to the most angel investors. Indeed, 650 million of these claims are being processed every year. So it gives you an impression that that can actually work. And it gets better because we know that angel investing is risky, but of course if your £10,000 angel investment fails, unfortunately you're in that 56% loss column. Let's just quickly give you the statistics. You make an investment of 10,000, you get a 2,000 tax relief straight away in the year that you make the investment, or indeed you can carry it back now into the previous year if you haven't got a tax offset. And your investment fails. Then what happens? You're a high rate taxpayer, you're paying 40% tax. You've got an 8,000 loss, not 10 because you had 2,000 subsidy. You can offset that 8,000 of loss at a high rate of 40%, that's £3,200, plus the 2,000. So you've actually lost 4,800 on a disastrous investment. The taxman's actually lost 5,200 on a disastrous investment. So you can see that your losses are water-cooled by the tax break system. And if you make a gain, you make 30 times on your angel investment. As long as you've held it for 3 years, you don't pay any capital gains tax at all. It's completely tax-free. So if you get a home run, you put 50,000 down, you take £1 million out, you don't pay any tax. It's tax-free. And it goes on. These investments are free of inheritance tax. I see a lot of angels building portfolios of these investments because they're non-taxable for inheritance tax. And indeed, you can defer chargeable gains as well as all the income tax reliefs. So it's lots of fun for the tax